Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, started on the 22nd of June 1941. It was the largest land offensive in military history. Over the course of the operation, over 3.8 million personnel of the Axis powers invaded the Western Soviet Union along a 2,900-kilometer front with 600,000 vehicles. Aviation played a critical role in the fighting on the Eastern Front. 3 German Luftwaffe or air fleets supported the land invasion. Luftwaffe 2 was assigned to supporting Army Group Center, which was to capture Minsk, Smolensk and Moscow. Army Group South was supported by Luftwaffe 4, responsible for capturing Kiev and the Crimea, and Army Group North was supported by Luftwaffe 1. The Luftwaffe was better equipped, trained, and experienced in executing military tactics and operations. On the opening day, German air operations succeeded in destroying 2,000 Soviet aircraft and gaining air superiority. After this success, the German Air Force was used as a kind of long-range artillery. It conducted close air support and interdiction missions. This enabled the Axis to support their armies in highly successful encirclement battles from July to September of 1941. But it is a little-known fact that the Luftwaffe had little intelligence on the Soviet air forces. Heinrich Aschenbrenner, the German air attaché in Moscow, was one of the few in Germany able to gain any clear insight as a result of a visit to 6 German aircraft plants in the spring of 1941. But his analysis was ignored by Göring and the Luftwaffe High Command. During Operation Barbarossa, General Hans Jeschonek was the Chief of General Staff of the Luftwaffe. He believed in quick war. To this end, he advocated throwing in all personnel, even training instructors, into short but intensive campaigns. The speed of the initial German advance threatened not only Soviet territories, but the wholesale collapse of the nation's economy. Evacuation of Soviet industrial plants began in August of 1941 and continued until the end of the year. More than 1,500 plants of military importance were evacuated to the Ural Mountains, Siberia, and Central Asia, as well as 11,000 tractors, other farming equipment, and cattle. To service them, 10 million people were also moved from the west to the new locations. These areas offered safety because they were out of reach of German airstrikes, and they offered Soviet industries a massive quantity of resources for the factories and plants associated with the war effort. The Urals in central Russia developed an impressive array of iron and steel factories, as well as agricultural and chemical plants. Despite early German successes in seizing control of Western Soviet territory, the evacuated Soviet industries eventually outpaced the Germans in arms production. A total of 73,000 tanks, 82,000 aircraft, and nearly 324,000 artillery pieces were distributed to the Red Army by 1945. So the Soviet regime was saved because of the evacuation of the industry in the second half of 1941. I would like to underline the fact that German strategic bombing could have been carried out during this period, especially on those Soviet armament works that lay within the range of the Heinkel 111 medium bombers. However, the need for ground support operations predominated in German air thinking. The Economic Intelligence Branch of the German High Command was led by General Georg Thomas. This branch provided a map before the invasion in February of 1941 about the location of the most important Soviet factories. But Hitler demanded close air support for the army, and initially there was no reserve which could have been set aside for strategic operations to commence with the air-land operations. Some German air units could have been freed from ground support duties, and they would have been able to carry out strategic bombing against Soviet factories. The most important target would have been the Kharkov tractor plant. As one of the largest industrial centers in the Soviet Union, Kharkov played a significant role in contributing to the country's military capabilities. In particular, the Kharkov tractor plant was instrumental in the design and development of the famous Soviet T-34 tank. Even Hitler emphasized the importance of capturing these military installations, recognizing that the region, especially the Donetsk basin extending from Kharkov area, was the foundation of the Soviet economy. The Germans believed that control of this vital economic center would inevitably lead to the collapse of the entire Soviet economy and the entire regime. But when German forces conquered Kharkov in late October of 1941, they found only empty factory buildings. Kharkov's industrial resources, including the T-34 tank factory, along with 223 large and 54 medium factories, were evacuated to the Ural Mountains. However, the bombing of Kharkov region and the destruction of the most important Soviet factories would have been possible from July of 1941. On the 14th of July, Hitler ordered the bombing of Moscow to strike the center of Bolshevik resistance and prevent the organized evacuation of the Soviet government. For the attack against Moscow, Göring had to reinforce Luftwaffe by 119 bombers transferred from France and Norway. Heinkel 111 bombers arrived from Kampfgeschwader, so Bomber Wing 4, 3rd Group of Kampfgeschwader 26, the 1st Group of Kampfgeschwader 28, and Kampfgruppe 100. The most important unit was Kampfgruppe 100, a specialist unit of the Luftwaffe. It is best known as the first unit in military history to use the Pathfinder concept, with its aircraft being equipped with the latest radio navigation aids to find their targets and then dropping flares on them for the following bombers. The Moscow night raids, called Operation Clara Zetkin after the founder of the German Communist Party, started on the 21st of July 1941. The Luftwaffe mounted 3 consecutive raids against the Soviet capital, each of more than 100 bombers. These raids against Moscow continued until April of 1942 on a smaller scale. With these raids, the Luftwaffe suffered minimal losses, but the damage to Moscow was also minimal. Instead of these totally pointless bombing of Moscow, the Luftwaffe could have used its 119 bombers to destroy the most vital factories of the Soviet Union between July and December of 1941. The Luftwaffe could have prioritized bombing railways, bridges, and locomotives in Western Russia to disrupt the transportation of machinery and personnel to the Urals. Persistent attacks on these infrastructure targets could have delayed or even prevented the evacuation process. A more focused campaign on the factories themselves before the evacuation began would have destroyed or heavily damaged critical facilities, making relocation impossible or less effective. The air superiority achieved and maintained over key regions of the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941 would have enabled the Luftwaffe to carry out sustained and unopposed night bombing raids on evacuation routes and industrial centers without long-range bombers. The Luftwaffe's doctrine was largely tactical and focused on close air support and interdiction. But with the reinforcements sent in late July for Operation Clara Zetkin would have provided the required bomber force to destroy or damage the majority of Soviet tank industry before and during the evacuation process. If the German Air Force had successfully prevented the evacuation of Soviet tank factories to the Urals in 1941, several significant consequences could have altered the course of the war, particularly in terms of Soviet military production and overall war capacity. The resulting shortage of tanks would have severely limited the Red Army's capacity to replace losses and equip new units. With fewer tanks available, Soviet forces would have struggled to mount effective defensives against the advancing German army. Key Soviet advancements, such as the mass production of the T-34 tanks, might have been delayed or even prevented, depriving the Red Army of crucial technological edges in later stages of the war. With the Soviet tank production crippled, the German army could have maintained its armored superiority longer, potentially enabling Germany to consolidate its gains and prolong the Eastern Front campaign. This could have diverted Soviet resources and weakened their overall war effort. In a scenario where Soviet military capacity was critically weakened, Stalin might have been pressured into negotiating a peace settlement in Germany. This could have dramatically altered the post-war political landscape in Europe. In summary, if the Luftwaffe had successfully prevented the evacuation of Soviet tank factories, the Soviet Union could have faced a severe industrial and military crisis. This could have led to a significantly weaker Soviet war effort, altering the dynamics of World War II and potentially prolonging or changing the outcome of the conflict. The loss of tank production capacity would have been a critical blow to the Soviet military's ability to resist and eventually defeat the German invasion. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to support my channel, check out the PayPal donation link in the description or consider becoming a member. To make sure you don't miss my future work, subscribe to my channel please and press the bell notification button. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.